Hey, film friends, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film, a podcast where we break down movies with some of my closest friends and special guests. But here I am, kind of alone again. But I'm taking heart because I know that all the theater kids and Broadway lovers are with me today. At last, a film adaptation of a long-running show that we just have to break down in detail. Guys, it's Jon Chu's Wicked. Okay, guys, so here's what I was going to do. I thought about starting this podcast. I was actually just looking back in my drawers. I was looking for, I have a playbill. It showed up on my, what do you call that, time hop from somewhere like late January of, I want to say 2016 or 17. And I had the program for when I saw Wicked off Broadway. And I'm sort of sorry to say, I think that might have been the last show I went to. Gosh, okay, maybe not. So now that I just lost all the theater kids, no. So I was gonna say, this is a phenomenon. This is a phenomenon. This has been around. This has been running for one of the greatest 21st century musicals, and I think some of the real stands have been like, are we going to get a film adaptation ever? What's it going to mean? How's it going to do? Who's going to mount the thing? And we have our answer. It's Jon M. and it's here. And it's Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo and Jonathan Bailey and Peter Dinklage playing a goat and just all sorts of things. So the question is, what is it? How was it? Does it? I always ask this question, does it justify its existence? Which is a sad thing to say in this IP heavy and rich world in which we keep recycling old things rather than making new original ones at mid-level budgets. But, you've heard that discussion from me before, so I will not digress any further. Plot-wise, okay, look, so if you have not seen The Wizard of Oz, I just do me a favor, just stop this, call in sick to work, find the nearest box, they're not boxes anymore, television streamer, whatever, and watch the original Wizard of Oz. That thing is such a thrill of childlike wonder and whimsy that continues to move me to my core 80-something years later. You got to start there. And I think I want to say this, if we are judging Wicked against that, which is like the example par excellence of what movie making was for decades and still holds up to this day, by the way, then it is, we're going to run into analysis that is fraught with issues, I would say. But we do have to figure out what Wicked's going to be about given The Wizard of Oz. Well, okay, if you remember the iconic imagery of The Wizard of Oz, there's a green witch who cackles high and rides on broomsticks and bikes and does all these things. And the question becomes, how did she get to be what she was? Well, as it turns out, she needed to go to a school that's ridiculously called Shiz University. You cannot make that crap up. With a bunch of other 35-year-olds become kind of frenemies with Linda, then just Glinda, and sort of get backed into her wickedness. Is that where? Yeah. We're going to have to get back to that one. But that's basically the plot, right? It's a coming-of-age story about a girl and about friendship and about these sorts of things that we are, in a way, retconning what becomes, and that superhero thing is going to come back up again, by the way, or comic book considerations, particularly in the third act of this one. How did she get to be what she was, which is to say, Wicked? That's the plot. If you need any more on that, it's going to break down around the songs anyway, and I think we're going to get to most of them. So, as usual, I'm more interested in story, which is to say themes, which is one of the reasons you're not going to find me shitting all over this. I think there are all sorts of reasons to do so, and I will do some of it because, come on, it's fun. But, excuse me, and there are plenty of things to get after here, but the themes of this are rich and look, they may be kind of wafer thin, in the case of the anti-fascist allegory, but it's still like good, laudable things to be discussing. Accepting differences, which in this case mostly turns around a green-skinned girl from birth and a goat who has trouble pronouncing GA together. There's like a larger cast, of as you can see, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, guys, so you're gonna have to deal with some hiccups here. But part of the problem of the movie is that like you see that most clearly through the character of the professor and through Elphaba, and not a whole lot of the rest of the animal kingdom. But it's about accepting differences. It's about not judging a book by its cover. How many of these lessons have we taught over the years to our kids? So stop bullying, you jerks, right? That's in there too. There's like a nice anti-bullying campaign right in there from the top. And then of course, a bigger metaphor for fascism, right? We're trying to get some rights for animals who are being persecuted. You can get into anything from discrimination to, as the machinations of the plot proceed, we get to a leader who is blaming a kingdom's problems on one particular group. Does this sound familiar? I'm not talking about Nazism. I may be talking about something a little closer to the present, but yes, certainly that. And so those are the themes. And I've already said this before, but I wonder if this movie and this plot, depending on your open-mindedness, is a little bit hard for true Oz heads, because the wizard, the Wicked Witch of the West is one of the greatest villains in cinema history. And part of that is her unadulterated evil, I think. And so now we get to a villain whose origin story involves sort of being framed or victimized. And I just wonder if that detracts from, or if some of the events of this story detract from what the original Oz sets up. But that's a question we can debate. And that's certainly not Chu's fault. That's not a problem of direction or anything. That's a part of the original mounting of this entire production. But much like the Grinch, right? The original Grinch story is like 27 minutes long, but it's like, why is this guy a bad guy? Well, because some people are just curmudgeons. But then we get the Carrie version where it's like, oh, he's bullied. Like, let's do the backstory. And then we get the Benedict Cumberbatch Grinch, which was like, no, he was never really bad. He was just kind of surly, right? In this sort of continental way. And well, if you could just have friendly guys like Keenan around as a neighbor, then maybe he'll work it out. Wow, I didn't expect to go into the Grinch, but anyway, this has been happening more and more in movies, right? We sort of do this thing, and in some ways, it's a good psychologization of what the world actually is, which is to say, far more gray than black and white. And I mean that black and white in all sorts of different ways, but it also. I don't know, man. Like every horror film nowadays is about trauma with a capital T, which again, true, but also like it's a little overwrought, right? When we do my breakdown of The Brutalist here coming up soon, I'll get into that a little bit more. But all right. So the other thing I think that's interesting thematically is that like I do think we need to have a little bit of the superhero IP convo. I'm not the first person to say this. In fact, I'm probably not the 101st person to say this, but there is like a kind of marvelization in this movie, but for a different audience, right? So you take a musical that's 2 hours and 40 minutes or 45 minutes total, and you make the first part of it, which you originally didn't advertise as either a musical or a 2-part series, and you make it like 2 hours and 40 minutes. Right, and stuff most of the songs from the better part of the songs in the musical in it. So you're serializing, right? You're putting stingers in. You're getting people to come back for that next thing if this thing is successful. And so it kind of takes the marvelization and spins it for a different audience. Now, a girl crowd. Now, I'm not. This is not to be gender essentialist. I mean, and certainly I think it's very clear that the theater crowd and the queer crowd has flocked to this story, and that's awesome. But I mean, look at the iconography at the end of the movie. Elphie is basically a superhero by the end. This is her origin story, humble beginnings, rising up, fighting back against this thing. I mean, even like some of the images in the last 20 minutes are akin to like all you needed is a few more wheat fields and you're at the like original like Donner Superman, right? So just wild stuff. All right, now look, let's get into the meat a little bit more. The below the line stuff, which is to say all of the awards that aren't like actors, writing, screenplay, all that sort of stuff, right? So cinematography, editing, sound design, production design, costume, all those sorts of things. I am very, very betwixt and between about this. Because on the one hand, this movie has gotten hammered for its colorization, its desaturation, right? And I've got to say, I both A, agree, and B, don't care as much as some people. I don't have the very best sound system, which is kind of shameful to admit for a visual and sound system for a critic. But I also, I don't know. It just kind of is what it is. It's desaturated. It looks dull. And the thing I think that does rub me is that Chu has gone out of his way to say like, well, we were trying to make it look more realistic, right? Because in Oz, it's a dream of Dorothy's, but this is like the real world, so we'll make it look real. First of all, like that's okay, cool, man, but it just doesn't work. It just really doesn't. And I think that's heightened by two things. One, the Technicolor in Oz is one of the most beautiful things ever. Like, not only for its time in the 40s, but now. It's some of the best ways to visually render a film we've ever seen. So to juxtapose it with this hot garbage visually is problematic, A. And B, how some of Chu's other movies look. Crazy Rich Asians, In the Heights, even like, look, I know there's some people listening that are Step Up 2 fans. Like, so I just think it's just kind of fascinating that you're going to bat against a film whose long shadow already hangs over this movie, not only in terms of plot and just iconography, but also in terms of its visual wonder. And then B, you've already made some pretty damn good looking stuff. So like Crazy Rich Asians, a film I actually love, but regardless of whatever else you think about the actors and the stories, like it's just beautifully shot and rendered. So I have those thoughts. And on top of that, every animal in this movie looks sucky. I don't even have a more complicated analysis than that. It's just that the CGI is brutal. Like the flying monkeys. It's just the whole animal subplot. It's like they didn't spend much time on it, which I get. But the problem is they're trying to make that like this grand thematic part of the story. And you don't invest it just becomes problematic. So, all right. But on the other hand, this is what I want to say. This dude built real sets with real loads of extras and actors whirling and dervishing and doing all of these things. And he has, as has been clear through In the Heights and all those other movies, he has a gift for dance choreography. I am no expert, and I think the Dancing Through Life sequence in the library is way too long. But it plays. It plays. And there are several moments in this movie where the dance choreography really plays. So I've got a kind of betwixt and between feeling about it. Do not like the visuals, impressed with some of the choreography. The biggest pro I can tell you about this film, one is an unadulterated, unfiltered pro. The other is mixed feelings. Ariana Grande. I mean, I'm not one of her 400 million Insta followers or whatever she has at this point, but like she is awesome in this movie. There's like really nothing else you can say. She's funny. She gives a great comedic performance, like all of her mannerisms and the hair flip, and it's completely over the top. And even if you're annoyed and hate her, that's the point of Glinda the Good in this story. So I just think, I don't know how I feel about Oscar nominations. Certainly there's not a weightiness to her performance, at least not in this act one. But her theater bona fides are definitely there. And I was, I guess, astounded. Not because I didn't think she was ever talented, but I didn't think she was. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I thought, wow. I mean, she went for it. She nailed it. She captured something that I think kind of sticks with you. Now, Cynthia Erivo, this is a very interesting thing because I do not think this film does her favors in several regards. One, she is too reserved and self-serious. Rather than sly, what we get is like half smirks. She's almost sullen and recessive. Now, I did see the musical, and I think that the musical fans will back me on this. The magic is like she just can't figure out what she has. She has magic there, but she has to kind of hone it into place. And in this film, it's more like this scary magic that could burst forth at any time, right? It's like Drew Barrymore in The Firestarter. Or, I mean, I even heard someone say on a pod, it's like Eleven in Stranger Things, which I think that there's something to that. She's, I don't know. She's got all this stuff in reserve, but she's kind of trying to figure out what it is. And I think that's just a slight twist from the musical. She's more playful. She's more antic in the actual musical, and therefore in some ways a little more lovable. And Erivo definitely, I mean, I've seen her in other things. She has that. And I guess that to me is the biggest issue, is that, and you see this come out in when we finally get to the showstopper, which in the musical and in this film in some ways is Defying Gravity, which is like, oh, wow, like this chick is a powerhouse. She's just been holding it in reserve to let it out, which works on one level, but on the other had me questioning, like, why not just have that part of her forward all along? Why write her to be so cerebral and sort of insular and almost aloof? And I get it, she's an outcast, but she's not like the way Idina Menzel played that character on stage was not like that. And I think it's to the detriment of this film. They may have tried to do it as a contrast to the sort of flightiness that Ariana is playing as Glinda, but it doesn't totally work, because you get to the end of the movie and you're like, damn, what a track. But why didn't I see this all along? It's like we had the MVP on the bench and we never put her in until the final inning. Like, I don't know. And I mean, speaking of that, I think Defying Gravity is both like a triumph. I mean, I had tears in my eyes, like a triumphant cinematic experience and a problematic rendering versus the musical. So it's all chopped up and it's like covered by all of these other noises and effects. I mean, that's the high point of the show by miles, which is when she basically finally blows the covers off and is like, I'm the best singer here. I'm the most talented magician in this area, in this kingdom. And this is me being me, right? I mean, we love that sort of stuff in Moana too. Like, but I have to admit that there is something filmic about the way that Chu renders it, in much the same way that, like I said, like a superhero way, like she's blasting out across these flying monkeys and she's whirving in. But like, there are parts of it that are like, am I watching a Quidditch match from Harry Potter? Like, why did you chop off the best effing song from the entire musical? I just kind of wanted to like listen to her belt it, which I think is kind of speaks to the criticism I've had all along, which is that I just wanted her to just be the powerhouse that Erivo clearly is for the whole thing. So maybe I'll get more of that in part 2. I can't believe I got to watch part 2. But maybe I'll get more of it then. So yeah, I think that's about all I've got to say. Positive, negative. You know, I guess my final score, like guys, I have struggled harder to score this film with anything than I've done in a very long time. And I think the reason is I just don't see what the point is of taking a dump on this movie. If you want to point to it as, well, let me just say this. I gave Wicked 3 out of 5 stars. There's a part of me that wanted to give it 3.5. And then there's a part of me that wanted to give it 1.5. And I kind of landed on 3 because I think it's easy to crap on the color palette. It's easy to say, why are we doing this and recycling old things? It's easy to talk about why they didn't render Elphaba's character as well and all the things. I mean, or not to mention, how about the fact that Michelle Yeoh and Jeff Goldblum, who are tremendous performers and actors and character actors. It's just like, is this the worst movie that both of them have ever been in? Like their worst roles, not the movie itself. I mean, they're like, what are they doing? It's like, it's bad cosplay. Like I don't know. And I love those two. I will ride for Super Cop all day. Yeah. So, and The Fly and a lot of other things. So yeah, I just don't know. Part of me wants to give this the 1.5 and give it the real big critical pan and be like, what are we doing? Why aren't we making original things and all this sort of stuff? But like at the end of the day, guys, come on. We got a musical that's pretty well made by a guy who clearly has some chops at rendering things visually, building his own sets and choreographing them. We got 2 actors who were committed, and despite any kind of flaws in the writing and construction, gave it their all and did a good job. Tons of people went to see it. We got a part 2 coming, which is probably going to be far too long. And yes, this film is long and slow in places, to me, longer than it needed to be. But ironically, it's because of its faithfulness of the adaptation, not its deviation. It's probably overly faithful, and then therefore why it's that long, because of the little interstitials that you have to put in when you're not on the stage. Yeah, all of those things are true. And yet at the end of the day, like, was I moved in certain places? Yes. Did I think there were talented performers on screen? Yes. Did I think there was a talented dude behind the camera? Yes. Did I think he took it really earnestly, almost maybe too earnestly, to the point of being laughable when he gives speeches at award shows? Hell yes. So I'm all sorts of all over the place, and I need you guys' thoughts on it. I need to know what you think, how you feel. I want to hear from the theater kids and the people who love Wizard of Oz and can't believe they ever touched that gold standard. 3 out of 5 stars. That's where I'm landing. Until next time, I'm Nick Furman. This is Furman on Film. Stay firm, my friends.